Just wanted to say a few words ahead of this video because these videos come off the back of a huge lot of Eaglemoss Star Trek ships that I picked up recently. And so I've put up all the duplicates on eBay for you to have a look at, and I'll include links around and about the place. So if you've got any sort of interest in getting hold of a few of these to have a look at them for yourself, you can do so for a while at least, because it looks like they're not going to go flying off the shelves. I've tried to price them quite reasonably, so do please go and have a look. And without further ado, I will get on with the main video. Cheers. Now this is one of these interesting ships that I've definitely watched videos of, but I don't think I've really sat and watched the episodes that contain it, so I really ought to, because this is coming from Star Trek Enterprise, which might seem surprising because this is a very unusual and advanced looking ship, but it is in fact a Romulan drone from 2154, so it is Enterprise era. But it was pretty nasty, and as the name would indicate, it was a drone. So it was being controlled by telepresence using an Andorian subspecies called the Einar. So the Romulans had kidnapped one of the members of this species and were basically sort of forcing him to use his telepathic abilities long range via subspace to control this ship. And being Romulans, they were doing it with a view to stirring dissension among other alien races. So the ship was able to use a holographic system to present itself as other alien ships. And it used a triphasic disruptor array in order to make its weapons look like other races' weapons. But the one thing they couldn't mask was its own power signature. So once you got close enough and you survived long enough, you could actually identify it as having a Romulan power signature. But otherwise, it was very, very fast at impulse, very, very maneuverable at impulse, could do warp 5 and a smidgen more, but it had no crew at all. It had a little bit of space inside where a crew could wander around, but otherwise it was completely automated. It could self-repair over time if it needed to. And there were 2 prototypes, and the Einar could actually control both of them simultaneously, although it was a massive strain on his biological system, so he had to be sort of stimulated to do it. Now, it was part of, I think it was a 3-part story. So it started with Babel 1 and ended with the Einar. I think it was the last episode, but I'll come to that at the end. So as you can see here, so it was Warp 5 as a prototype, holographic skin, and it was so fast that other ships actually found it very, very hard to target it, let alone actually do any damage to it by its nature. So as you can see, it was this very, very sort of distinctive looking insectoid thing. Its nickname in production was the Flea, apparently, which makes perfect sense because it does kind of look like one. But interestingly, what I didn't know about this model was that it actually turned up in Voyager first. Very, very briefly, apparently, in a very sort of sneaky fashion. And it didn't look like this. It wasn't green originally. It didn't have all these holographic emitters on it. But it was in Voyager. But apparently, powers that be told the guy who designed it that it couldn't be used as an alien ship in Voyager because it didn't look enough like other Star Trek ships, which ironically was exactly what he was going for because he wasn't part of the in-house VFX department. But when the time came to do this episode, they basically said, have you got anything you can just reuse effectively? So he recolored this other model that he'd done and used very briefly in one Voyager episode in the background, and he developed it into this drone. And he said that, and this was years later, so he was able to up its sort of use of ray tracing and lighting and everything else. So he was able to do more with it when he actually came to use it properly and finally in Enterprise. But it just goes to show that, you know, the reuse of digital assets can happen just in the same way that they kit bash real models. So you can see here it's got these multispectral emitters, which are the sort of the the hologram emitters. It's got its warp engine back there, but these subspace transceivers are what are key for it, because if it can't get signals from its home base, then it just sits there, because it has to have the constant subspace linkage with the Einar to actually get it to move. So it's an interesting one, because it has that distinct weakness that if they got damaged, or if you could jam them, it would just die basically in space. And the program got dropped after the initial 2 prototypes got taken out. But they only got taken out when the Einar actually rebelled against the Romulans and sort of refused to operate the drones. And the Romulans weren't strong enough telepathically to operate it themselves. So it had that sort of key dependency which they couldn't get past. And this is the version of it, I might be a bit shiny actually, but this is the version of it that was in Voyager, very, very briefly. So as you can see, it's the same basic design, it was just a very, very different sort of skin colour, and it didn't have anywhere near as much detail on the skin. It didn't have sort of the emitters and so on, and it appeared in a couple of other moments as well, but not for any great length of time. But then ultimately it got brought back and upgraded and used as this rather nasty, vicious drone. I mean, as I recall, whilst this was aiming to disrupt the overall sort of progress of aliens coming together, it actually had the inverse effect, because Archer managed to bring an alliance of people together, an alliance of different races, like the Andorians, like the Tellarites, who the drone was particularly targeting to try and get them at each other's throats. He actually brought them together to help combat the drone, because he had enough evidence at that point to explain to them what was going on. Initially, I'm not actually sure if they ever figured out that it actually was Romulan in origin, but apparently the Romulans were concerned that the Vulcans would recognise it as Romulan. I mean, we know it's Romulan because it looks green, and it's like a classic Romulan colour. And the Romulans always had very good tech compared to others, but for whatever reason, they choose to use more sort of disruptive, behind-the-scenes kind of tactics rather than going out and out head-to-head with people. It doesn't seem to be quite what they do militarily. But if you think about it, in Star Trek The Next Generation, the Romulan Warbird was always considered more than a match, really, for a Galaxy-class starship from the Federation. So, they were not to be trifled with, really, not unless you wanted a serious beating. So we've got the drone there with the Enterprise in the background, and Tucker and Thingy got on board as well at one point, so they were able to sort of do some damage to it from the inside. But as I say, I'm not very well up on these episodes. I don't know exactly how it sort of transpired, but what they were going for here was laying some foundations for something which I believe is mentioned in the original series, which is Unearth of Romulan War, but which we've never seen on screen. But had Enterprise got a 5th season, they would have tried to bring in the Romulan War. And these episodes were kind of laying the groundwork for that. So it was Babel 1 and the Einar with a couple of the episodes it appeared in. But I think there was a 3 episode run, so there must be another one sandwiched between those two, I think, in which it appeared. Interestingly, the Admiral was called the Admiral Valdor, which was a Nemesis callback, because there's a ship in Nemesis which is Romulan, which is called the Valdor. It's an interesting one. Very sort of unusual ship design to see in Enterprise, and indeed in Trek generally, to have a sort of an unmanned drone being used in that sort of fashion, but being controlled at a distance. At a great distance as well. Now, I've been warned about this because as soon as I saw it, I thought this is going to be one of those really, really breaky models, because it's got all of these subspace antennae in the front of it. So I'm going to be fairly careful, I hope, when I get this out, because I don't want little antennae pieces everywhere, because putting these things back together again is a bit of a nightmare. So let me just think about this as I'm opening it, because sometimes these models just drop out immediately when you open the box, so I'm just being a little bit careful here. And this must have been a nightmare to actually engineer physically. I mean, just look at all of these little spiky bits everywhere. Spiky bits. It's like the proverbial hedgehog. So I mean, you can imagine how. I mean, it's quite a light model as well. This is all sort of plasticky stuff. I think. Don't think there's a lot of metal. I sometimes wish that they would do these little protrusions, or would have done these little protrusions in metal, because I think it would have given even more durability to some of the models. But yeah, I mean that's you're gonna have to be so careful with that one. I mean, I suppose on the plus side, if you do drop it, it's probably light enough that it wouldn't necessarily knock things off, but it's the sort of thing that kind of almost makes you break it because it's so easy to do, and then the more conscious you are of it, the easier it is to do it when you don't mean to. I don't know. It's just sod's law, I guess. Now I should have had a closer look in the magazine about where exactly the stand's supposed to sit, because again, if it falls off the stand, you're probably also in trouble. Let's have a quick look. See if we can get this. It's a very odd stand. That's a hole in the middle of the base of the stand, so it must be. I wonder if it's rigged to actually. Let's stop. I'll stop guessing at this point and actually have a look at the instructions. So it goes in with a thing at the back, and it's actually, as I thought, I see the spike at the front is going down through that. I see. Well, that makes sense. It would be awkward otherwise. So it's going to be like that with this spoke, or whatever you want to call it, at the back there. Again, I've got to be really careful when I pick it up. Now, no, perhaps I'm wrong actually, perhaps it's the other way around. So maybe that spoke is at the back, because this is going to end up at the nose, isn't it? Like this. So I think it goes in there. I think. Does it? No. Sorry, let me consult the manual again, because I don't think I've got that right. No, that does look right. It must just be a question of getting the positioning just so, I think. That's it, I think. Now I've just noticed it's got what could be an impulse engine, or a. See, there's a differentiation in the colour on the back there, so I wonder if that's supposed to be an impulse drive at the back there. Well, I'm not sure if that's normal for Romulan ships or not, but there she is, and I'll try and lift her up. Wait for it. Smack, crash and burn. I mean, it's a fascinating looking thing, because it's so unusual compared to most of the other sort of Star Trek ships that you see. And the detail on it is really, really lovely. There's a lot of really, really nice patterny sort of skin work there. So yeah, I mean, as I say, it's one I've often sort of half thought about, but then I kind of dismissed because I didn't know it very well. But as I've picked it up in my job lot, it's no skin off my nose to have it now, basically. So it's all good. So I'm just hoping to God that I never drop it in any serious fashion. Now I've got to move it over to have its portrait shot done, so that'll be interesting. But anyway, so yeah, interesting design, very, very unique design for the Star Trek universe, and I'll leave it there at that point, and hopefully I won't drop it. Cheers for now.